Iran's President Mas'ud Pezeshkian has called for unity and apologized for the shortcomings that exist after the recent crackdown on nationwide anti-government protests. Pezeshkian also insisted that the nation is not seeking nuclear weapons. His comments do come as Iranians mark the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, with millions taking to the streets celebrating. But this year's commemoration comes at one of the most challenging moments in the Islamic Republic's recent history, and just hours before actually a meeting takes place in Washington.
We are not willing to own a nuclear weapon. We cannot allow for our relations with our regional and neighbouring countries to collapse, yet we are faced with a conspiracy from imperial powers. We're using all our strength to reinforce peace and harmony in the region. It is the people of the region only who can solve our own problems. Together with Muslim countries, we can resolve our problems without any intervention by alien Westerners.
And indeed, that meeting will be taking place at the White House. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with US President Donald Trump. He says he may actually send a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East if talks with Iran fail. Netanyahu is expected to urge Trump to push for a deal that would also curb Iran's missile program and support for regional groups. Meanwhile, mediation efforts are continuing. Iranian officials have met the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, a day after visiting Oman to ease tension with the US. Qatar's leader has also spoken to Donald Trump on the phone. The two leaders discussing efforts for regional de-escalation and stability. Well, Osama bin Javed is standing by in Doha, but first let's get to Rasul Sadar, who is in Tehran. Rasul, give us a sense how this speech by Pezeshkian went down with the crowds.
Well, indeed, it was welcomed by many of Iranians here. However, this is not a new stance when we look at the President Pezeshkian's posture toward the protests and also the problems that the country is facing. Since the beginning of the protest on, he has been acknowledging that the country has some shortcomings, particularly regarding the economic hardships that people are facing. He was again and again repeatedly saying that the government is open to the dialogue and to listen to the demands of the people. However, he's also saying that is in line with the establishment here, saying that many of the protesters were deceived by the external powers, by the Zionist regime, he means Israel, and also by Americans. He also believes that there was an international plot against Iran to destabilize the country. But when we look at the establishment here, particularly the security apparatuses and the judiciary officials, they have been quite clear and promising a firm and a harsh punishment for those who have been involved in the protest, and particularly those who have been using the violence against the security forces. So in that sense, we see a kind of nuance between the approaches of the government and the other representatives of the establishment here. But on the other hand, he has been quite clear when it comes to the country's nuclear program and also the country's relations with the regional countries. He thanked many of the leaders and officials of the regional country, once again reiterating Iran's position that the country is not seeking for the nuclear weapons. But here, one thing is quite clear. As there is a huge potential of a war, the establishment here is trying to show the world that millions are still supporting the establishment.
Osama, and of course the Emir of Qatar had this telephone call with Donald Trump. Do we know more details about that?
Well, according to the release from the Emiri Divan, this was a bilateral conversation, strategic importance issues that both countries, especially stability through dialogue in the region, was discussed. And you have to realize that Qatar is in the middle of all of this. It is not only pushing for a mediated solution, a diplomatic solution to this escalating Iranian crisis, but also smack in the middle of whatever is happening in Gaza, where Qataris have been trying to mediate between both sides. And remember that this is where this whole issue emanated from, that this 2.5 years of genocide in Gaza and the Iranian tensions with Israel, and now this continued buildup of US military and troops in the region is obviously of concern to Qatar, that because last time around when the United States decided to attack Iran using its bases, there were American soldiers and hardware present in Qatar as well. So it is going to be crucially important for all sides, and Qatar has to maintain that role of talking to the Iranians and bringing down tensions from the United States, which is also being egged on by Israel to go into a conflict, according to the Iranians.
Rasul, now this is an annual event in Tehran, of course, celebrating the revolution. But was it different this time? Did it feel different? Was the mood in any way not like it used to be?
It is quite different now because for the first time since the Islamic Revolution that happened in 1979 on, perhaps the country is facing the biggest challenge. And it's not only an external challenge that is coming from the United States or from Israel, but internally also is facing the growing challenges. There is a huge political and societal division in the country. On one hand, millions are asking for the change, while on the other hand, there are millions that are still supporting the establishment here. But the division is quite sharp here. The internal fragility of the country is extremely evident. And on the top of that, so there is a huge military buildup right at the door. And Iranians are seeing that almost after like 8 months, the country could be attacked once again. And that's why we are seeing that on one hand, they are making it clear to the Americans and Israelis that Iranians are ready to fight back, are ready to retaliate if their country is coming under attack. But on the other hand, they're heavily engaged in the diplomatic force as well. However, here the concern is that I think Iranian officials are more and more aware of that there is a huge gap when it comes to the negotiations between the position of Iran and the United States. Iranians are saying that it should be a fair deal, and the Americans are coming with an extremely unacceptable terms.
Osama, what about Larijani's meeting with the Emir and all of this, of course, as part of Iran's regional push to diffuse tensions?
Absolutely, Rishad. So you just heard Rasul describe to you that this is a twofold operation. One, projecting power and strength internally to the Iranian public and telling them that they stand steadfast, and then going out in the region and telling their allies that they're ready to talk. They want to defuse these tensions. They want a diplomatic off-ramp. Remember, just a week ago, there was talks about this meeting between the United States and Iran taking place in Turkey. Then Iranians insisted that it needs to be in Oman because the last talks were disrupted when the Americans struck them while they were in talks in Oman. And now, in addition to their top diplomat, they have now sent Ali Larijani. Ali Larijani is somebody who is now, again, after 20 years, the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, somebody who's seen close to the Ayatollah, somebody who's seen close to the IRGC. And the message is that both diplomatically and militarily, they want to tell their allies, their partners in the region, that they want to defuse tensions, they're ready for talks. The question is, how much are they willing to give? Because as you know, that the Americans want to discuss everything from the nuclear program to missile defense systems to Iran's influence in the region. And the Iranians insist that apart from the nuclear program, there's nothing else that's on the table right now.
Osama, thank you. Osama bin Javed and Rasul Sadar there in Tehran. Right, well, let's unpack all of this a bit more. I'm joined by Ali Akbar Dairini. He is a researcher at the Center for Strategic Studies in Tehran. And joining me right here in the studio is Luciana Zakara, an Iran and Gulf politics analyst. Luciana, you know, we've had Pezeshkian say that the country is not seeking nuclear weapons. Was that a clear message to the US?
Yeah, it's been the message since the beginning of this dispute. Iran wants to make clear to the United States that regardless of any kind of the development in the nuclear program, it was never aimed at achieving a nuclear weapon. Of course, there have been discussions about the nuclear doctrine in Iran, considering the attacks that took place in June and before with Israel, exchange that happened with Israel. But the position of Iran is clear. The Islamic Republic is not interested in achieving nuclear weapons, and they have the commitment with the United States and with the international community.
So what's the point of their nuclear program then?
The nuclear program is supposedly to achieve the autonomous process of enrichment of uranium from the mineral, the uranium mineral, to the mineral material that is used for nuclear electric centrals in order to produce electricity.
But
and
they've got arguably the richest country in terms of energy wealth. They have the fourth biggest oil reserves, second biggest gas reserves.
Well, any country has the right to develop a nuclear program while it is under supervision of the atomic energy. And this is what Iran has been doing since before the Islamic Revolution. We have to remember that the program was started by the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, in agreement with the United States and with the collaboration of the United States in the 60s. And they were signatory of the NPT since 1968. So this is not something that was started by the Islamic Republic.
Luciano, when you look at all this as well, there's this question I asked you earlier, which was, 2025 was arguably Iran's annus horribilis. We had, of course, some of its nuclear ambitions being thwarted, as were some of its geopolitical ones by the wiping out of some of its proxies. The economy cratered, and on top of that, there were all these protests at the end of the year. How has that seen the regime alter in its global-facing way, if you will? I mean, surely it's marked down its negotiating stance.
Of course, we cannot disregard what happened in 2025. There were a lot of stress on the government, on both the leadership and the presidency. The economic performance of Iran is very poor, not only because of what happened inside, but because of the pressure. And also, Iranian regional stance was heavily affected by Israeli war and United States attack. So, of course, they are in much more weaker position than ever before in negotiating with the international
Does it make
powers.
it more dangerous, ironically, in a way?
Could be, because Iran is now pressure by from different areas, by internal unrest and external pressure. And of course, the reaction can be much even worse than ever before. The problem is that Iran still is engaged in conversation and they want to reach an agreement, because the main aim of the leadership is regime survival. In order to have regime survival, you have to negotiate. And this is the opportunity that the United States has now to have fair negotiations in which Iran is able to offer something in exchange for something. Only military pressure to get something from the United States will not contribute to negotiations, but is going to prevent negotiations to happen.
Luciano, thank you so much. Luciano Zakara there, he's an Iran and Gulf analyst.